283 days, 283 days of silence, 283 days when the world believed the ship was lost, 283 days when England was already praying for the dead, but they were alive, Mauskoyu. And then, in early 1744, 30 men crawled onto the shore of a small Brazilian town, each a walking skeleton, wrapped in thin skin, eyes that had seen too much. These were the sailors of the Wager, their shipwreck, survival on a deserted island, and the voyage on a homemade boat became a serial in newspapers. 6 months later, the truth came out. They weren't heroes. They were mutineers, killers, and according to some, cannibals. Mauskoyu minin simdant portasindri, thou 1742. Britain and Spain were locked in war, two empires preparing to divide the world. Who controls the sea controls trade. Who controls trade controls wealth. Spain dominated Latin America. Britain wanted to challenge them. In practice, seizing resources, slavery, subjugating peoples. Both called it bringing civilization. Britain planned a massive attack on Spanish territories in the Caribbean. Nearly 200 ships. Part of the plan was a secret mission. 5 British warships would sail around South America and destroy Spanish ships trading with Asia in the Pacific. The main target, a Spanish galleon, loaded with gold and silver, sailing twice a year from Mexico to the Philippines. Capturing it would be the biggest prize in history. Captain George Anson led the fleet, his second in command, Lieutenant David Cheap. For Cheap, this was a double opportunity. First, capturing an enemy ship loaded with treasure meant massive rewards. This would solve all his financial problems. Second, the mission offered a real chance to become a captain. He had been Anson's right-hand man for years. David Cheap was desperate to get moving, but months passed. The Centurion still sat in the dock, Malkadutis Minison. In the 18th century, when ships were wood, the greatest enemies were cannons, seawater, termites, mold, rats, woodworm growing up to 30 centimeters. Everything destroyed ships quickly. After every voyage, massive ships had to be rebuilt almost entirely. One of the 5 ships was named Wager. Originally, the 37-meter Wager was a trading ship for the East India Company. With war against Spain looming, Britain bought it and converted it into a warship. 50 men were supposed to sail on the Wager, on the Centurion, 500. But none of the 5 ships could fill their crews. Britain had no navy recruitment system. Volunteers were scarce during wartime. Desperate, the Admiralty took extreme measures. Raids began. They grabbed anyone who looked like a sailor, smoke under fingernails, wood tar on clothes. Even that wasn't enough. To fill 5 ships, the Admiralty pulled 140 infantrymen with no sea experience, nearly useless. Then came 500 veterans from almshouses. Many were 50, 60, 70 years old. Rheumatism, blindness, deafness, missing limbs. Captain Anson and Lieutenant Cheap were not happy with the crew. But 2,000 men on 5 ships were assembled. In September 1740, nearly a year late, the fleet sailed. Wager means to bet in English. The name was eerily symbolic. In September 1740, none knew they were making the biggest bet of their lives. Initial the In the half-dark, dozens of fabric sacks hung from the ceiling like cocoons, hammocks where ordinary sailors slept. In one hammock lay John Byron. He was only 16, an aristocrat. He could have become a captain or admiral eventually. But first, 6 years as a normal sailor to learn the ship from inside. His family was full of lords and barons. For that level, the Navy wasn't usual choice. But Byron was inspired by books about explorers. He decided this was his calling. On the Wager, his romantic expectations collided with brutal reality. Dirty decks, men in rags, constant stench, rats. In his diary, Byron wrote, "On one of the first days, overwhelmed, he took off his neckerchief, covered his eyes, and cried." The Wager was society in miniature, from urban underworld to noble officers. The ages, a 10-year-old boy and an 80-year-old cook, hundreds of men, different ages, origins, experiences, personalities, all forced to spend years in confined space. The glue holding them together, discipline. Discipline enforced brutally. A ship's captain had more power than a king. He could order a sailor beaten. After the voyage, a naval court could sentence a sailor to prison or execution. The first month was calm, routine work, good discipline, few sick, enough food. In England, every ship carried a whole farm, pigs, chickens, sheep. During the voyage, they made loud noises, protesting the sea journey. Captain Anson's main problem was the schedule. Bad winds meant the fleet traveled 1/3 the distance expected. After a short stop at Madeira, they set course for South America. Britain was already at war with Spain. Sailors scanned the ocean for enemy ships, but they also prepared for battle. The ships practiced firing cannons. Each cannon needed 6 men. An 8-kilogram cannonball flew at 360 meters per second. The recoil knocked the cannon backward. If a sailor didn't move, he died. Ships moved constantly with waves and wind. Accurate firing was a true art. Artillerymen were respected, experienced sailors who passed exams. John Bulkeley served over 10 years. He started at the bottom and became an artilleryman. Many noted his discipline and leadership. In another universe, Bulkeley might have become a captain, but without noble birth, the path to command was closed. In those days, scurvy was the deadliest disease among sailors. It killed more than storms, cannons, and all other diseases combined. Sailors' limbs swelled, bodies ached, skin turned blue, most so weak they couldn't get out of hammocks. Captain Anson wrote, the worst scurvy outbreak he had ever seen. On the Centurion, only half the original 500 men remained. On the Wager, better, but still 1 in 5 died. No one held burial ceremonies anymore. No energy. Sailors just threw bodies into the water. The fleet was close to lacking enough men to operate the ships. Even most who could stand moved like zombies. Ship doctors couldn't help. Scurvy was known, but in 1741, no one knew the cause or treatment. The answer was simple: scurvy caused by severe vitamin C deficiency. Sailors' diets had almost no fresh vegetables or fruit. 7 months after leaving England, 4 weeks into the Drake Passage, one chaplain wrote, the crew in total decay, the only hope, round South America and reach the first inhabited island near Chile. But navigation was a problem. Modern longitude systems didn't exist yet. The captain and crew didn't always know exactly where they were. Even familiar waters, even in good weather, became dangerous. A ship could easily hit coastal rocks and crash, let alone the Drake Passage. In storms and poor visibility, the fleet could split and lose each other. Before the crossing, Captain Anson gave orders. Ships should reach Chile and wait for each other at a specific point for 2 months, then continue. By mid-April, a couple of ships fell behind. Many sailors thought their colleagues, exhausted by storms and disease, had turned back. The remaining ships tried to stay together, lit lamps on deck, fired cannons every 30 minutes. But despite this, within a week, the Wager's sailors lost sight of all other ships. April 19, Bulkeley wrote, he last saw the Centurion's lights, then they disappeared into darkness. The Wager was alone. If they crashed, no one would help. At best, spend the rest of their days on a forgotten, uninhabited island. David Cheap commanded his first warship. He intended to reach the meeting point in Chile and finish the mission, whatever it cost. But could the exhausted crew and storm-battered ship do it? Another question. Bulkeley thought Cheap was wrong. In its condition, the Wager couldn't reach Chile on time. Worse, the course was wrong, too close to shore, risking rocks. Nearly a month passed since the Wager was alone. According to Cheap's calculations, the ship sailed north, parallel to Chile, at a safe distance. May 13, a carpenter reported to Lieutenant Baines he saw something like land. Baines said impossible. His data showed over 200 kilometers to shore. He didn't tell the captain. The Wager continued. Bulkeley decided to check. He climbed the high lookout on a mast. Weather still bad. The ship shook constantly. In the distance, only grey fog, rain, clouds. But after some time, Bulkeley saw land, clearly. And given the weather, this meant only one thing: dangerously close to rocks. Bulkley immediately reported to Captain Cheap. Cheap ordered an urgent turn. The captain climbed the mast himself, helping sailors manage the sails. He stumbled and fell from great height onto the deck. The impact was so strong, his shoulder bone popped out. They carried the captain, severely injured, to the middle deck, where the operating room was. The wager turned at the last moment and avoided the rocks. That night, the crew felt a strong thud. Some thought a giant wave hit the ship, but the thud came from below. Only one explanation: the ship hit a rock. Sailors inspected the hull. No damage. Then another hit. This time, a large hole appeared in the hull. Water began filling the ship. The ship rocked violently. Panic began. No damage. Even those who hadn't stood from hammocks for months due to scurvy tried to get on deck. Others prayed. Others ran. The most desperate jumped into the water. A small group of experienced sailors, including Bulkley, tried to stay calm and control the ship. But quickly, it became clear. Their situation was hopeless. The ship would sink soon. When salvation seemed impossible, a faint light of hope appeared in the distance. First, the ship was caught between two rocks, slowing its descent. Then clouds scattered. In the distance, something appeared. The Wager's crew saw the outline of an island. Unpeel builder. On the middle deck, where the operating table stood, water rose. There, half-conscious, lay Captain David Cheap. From the sounds of collision and panic, he understood what happened. The first warship under his command was sinking. Meanwhile, sailors seeing the island decided how to reach it. In theory, the distance allowed swimming, but the violent waters made it impossible. Plus, many sailors couldn't swim. Some believed swimming wouldn't save them in an open ocean shipwreck. It would only prolong suffering. Better to drown immediately. David Cheap ordered sailors to launch several lifeboats. When no crew remained on the ship, the captain left the Wager. After everyone reached shore, Cheap counted the men. 145 remained, slightly more than half the original crew, exhausted, sick, in torn clothes, or sometimes naked. It felt like their ship had crashed years ago, not hours. Exhausted sailors sat on the empty shore, soaked by rain. Menhabandet, benanahin memfendetta. So someone lived here, or had recently. Inside, they made a place for Captain Cheap and a few officers, Amaudum in heap. Everyone else stayed on shore, without shelter, in wet clothes. That night, they tried to sleep. Few succeeded. Next morning, sailors found several comrades who seemed to have slept so deeply they barely moved. Later they realized sleep wasn't the reason. They were dead. Venau menandit manda, men na, mau menan, men benandin pim. The Wager was still caught between rocks, partially above water. Cheap ordered boats loaded with anything useful, materials, clothes, and most importantly food, menhamandi. Nadaum. Despite obtaining flour, dried meat, beans, and other supplies, it was clear this wouldn't last long. Hundreds of people need a lot of food, even with strict rationing. So the only option, find food on the island. To the sailors' disappointment, this unnamed piece of land was far from paradise. They found only wild celery as edible plants. Surprisingly, no fish in the coastal waters. Birds were another option, but they rarely shot more than a few. The 80-year-old cook made something like soup from what they caught, adding flour to thicken it. Searching for food, they explored the island better. From a small hill, they clearly saw they were on a relatively small piece of land. Distance between the farthest points, about 5 to 6 kilometers. Several mountains rose from the dense forest, filling almost the entire island. This is a place where a human soul dies. 100 years later, a captain landing there would describe it this way. For the Wager's sailors, this merciless place became home. They knew, with boats in terrible condition and violent waters, trying to sail away for rescue would fail. David Cheap walked along the shore, leaning on a stick. Though still weak, he knew he had to act. Menhabandet. If they wanted to survive, they had to work together. And that required discipline, order, and clear hierarchy. Cheap wanted to show he was still in charge, even if part of the crew blamed him. By his order, sailors began building huts, They made frames from branches and sticks, covering them with sail fragments and clothes. Soon, a street-like arrangement appeared on shore, with dozens of huts on both sides. One building became a storage shed. They kept all supplies from the ship and food found on the island. Amanda Habanda. 1 week after the crash, morale improved. Food was scarce, but clearly rationed. Everyone knew what to expect. Sailors even got bonuses, wine or brandy salvaged from the ship. The civilized representatives of the kingdom looked like savages in the literal sense. We the Stunandanis, and now the arriving Kiasar were now the sailors' only hope against hunger. David Cheap welcomed the native people. Both sides poorly understood each other, speaking unknown languages. The Wages crew tried to offer gifts, hats. The Kiasar showed no interest in gifts, but they seemed to understand the sailors' desperate situation. Several long-haired men jumped into a boat and returned with a large fish catch and unusual spiky balls containing orange mass. These were sea urchins. The tribe members skillfully built shelter from branches and spent several days on the island, finding food for the sailors. One morning, the crew found only empty huts, ravage. At night, they quietly gathered and sailed away. Maybe some sailors tried to approach Kiasar women. Maybe they sensed danger. Maybe they just needed to leave. Anyway, they left only a small amount of sea gifts, enough for maybe 2 days. In the forest near shore, John Byron found a dog. Apparently, the Kiasar forgot the dog when they quickly left the island. During the day, the animal followed Byron everywhere. Byron took the dog into his hut. The dog warmed the sailor with its heat and became his friend. Several days later, several comrades came to Byron's hut. They needed the dog. Byron knew resisting was useless. That evening, sailors ate the dog for dinner. Later, Byron came for his portion. In extreme hunger, many human qualities became secondary, another result of the crew's terrible condition. Complaints about leadership. Artilleryman Bulkley often criticized Cheap in his diary. More and more sailors blamed the captain and questioned his legitimacy, what right gave him command on the island. According to rules, they should obey the captain on the ship. So logically, after the crash, he had no power. The crew slid into anarchy. Small groups separated, lived by themselves, set their own rules. One day, several sailors found a corpse on the island. Not that another sailor's death surprised anyone, but, according to Byron, this victim's neck showed signs of strangulation. The devil never rests, constantly seeking a new soul to destroy. That was written in the religious book Bulkley read. He was one of the few who kept self-control. His hut was always tidy. He often brought food after hunting birds. He also had a small secret weapons stash from the ship. Gradually, other crew members came to Bulkley's hut for advice and help. He could never become a ship captain due to his origin, but nature's forces didn't care about blood. In this new reality, John Bulkley looked like the obvious leader and authority among the sailors. His strength was that Wages officers remained loyal to the captain. Also, Britain had a strict naval code. According to it, mutiny was one of the most serious crimes, punished by execution, Taldom the Timini. But in hunger and psychological pressure, anything could happen. Cheap needed to show he was still legitimate authority. The opportunity didn't wait long. 2 sailors were caught stealing from the supply hut. One was the guard. By Cheap's order, the thieves received 600 lashes each. The punishment was so severe that if done at once, they would surely die. So they got 200 lashes over 3 days. Afterward, Cheap ordered the guilty taken to a small piece of land sticking out of water near Wager Island. Several days later, when Byron and some sailors visited the punished comrades, they found both already dead. Captain Cheap was sure the punishment would end theft attempts, but soon theft continued. Thieves were caught, beaten with ropes. New ones came. No matter how terrible the punishment, hunger scared more. Enid Meldemost Smitty senged. In the atmosphere of semi-anarchy, Captain Cheap had a conflict with a sailor named Cosin. Cosin refused to obey the boss's orders and move a heavy barrel of dried beans. Fundays 1. Cheap thought the sailor was drunk. Cosin denied it, but the captain ordered him arrested in the hut serving as the island prison. Several days later, after Cozen was released, he got into a new conflict. In the food line, he learned the captain ordered no wine for him. A dispute started. At some point, a gunshot rang out. Captain Cheap was in his tent, not witnessing the scene, but hearing the shot, he immediately ran out. Seeing the situation, he thought Cozen, denied wine, started shooting. Enraged, Cheap drew his pistol and pressed it to the sailor's cheek. Seconds later, another shot. Sailor Cozen lay on the ground in a pool of blood. Around stood wager sailors, officers, and Captain Cheap. The confusion was explained by another fact. The shot Cheap heard from the tent was not Cozen's. Someone shot at him because he was aggressive, but missed. But Captain Cheap, due to the previous conflict, was convinced Cozen fired. Cheap ordered everyone to disperse. Despite this, almost no one moved. At this moment, many sailors planned their next actions. Before them stood a captain whose competence was already questionable, but now he had killed a man, in front of everyone, without understanding the situation, and no one doubted the price of disobedience. Direct path to mutiny. If they ever returned to England, they would likely be executed. Ardid, Bermainwood, en emisna telling, mornan fordan. Nemo mistians, Yundanidita, minventadenidita. No sterilization, no anesthesia. The operation should have killed the patient rather than healed him. But Sailor Cozen survived another 2 weeks. While alive, he asked the doctor to keep the bullet removed from his jaw as proof of Captain Cheap's crime. Wager sailors buried Cozen. Day 41 on the island. Despite hunger, exhaustion, and psychological pressure, not all crew members gave up. Several weeks after the shooting incident, one carpenter proposed in Vinfindin. Ian Propintin proposed. Launch a boat to find rescue. Some wanted to sail away. Others wanted to stay. The Endanidita, Manmons, inevitable. 6 months after returning to England, the truth came out. They weren't heroes. They were mutineers, killers, cannibals. The Wager's story, survival, shipwreck, miraculous rescue, Yondanidita, but also treasure hunt, naval battles, triumph, and a mystery lasting centuries. Ordamam.